Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Junior and Luciano for inviting me. It has been long. It was a little while since the last time I was here, but I love coming here. The energy of this place is amazing. I love it. So thank you again for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you. So yes, today we're going to talk about put your sword away. And this topic, I was Susana Simões from the Spirit Center, Conscious Living from Miami. She had invited me to talk. And I asked her, okay, give me a topic. What do you want me to talk about? And she goes, well, how about the passage, put your sword away, from John? I'm like, okay, all right. So I was familiar with the passage. So I went back and I read the passage again. And while I'm reading this passage, and this passage is the one that Peter, the apostle, takes his sword and tries to cut. He cuts the high priestess servant ear. And I was reading it, and I'm like, I need to know more about Peter, because I didn't want to only talk about the passage. I wanted to really understand why Peter did what he did at that time. Because that's how we learn, right, about ourselves, when we look at others. And so I start studying Peter a little bit, his story. And learning the story of Peter, we talk, at Spirit Centers, we talk a lot about Paul, the Apostle Paul, and we talk about what Paul has done, but not a lot about the other apostles. And I found out that I didn't know a lot about Peter. And Peter is so much like me. He's so relatable. I related so much, and I think you're going to feel the same way if you don't know about Peter, if you're going to find out about him a little bit today. I'm sure you're going to be able to relate to him, because Paul, it was that miracle day. He saw Jesus, the bright light, and then he converted. He was a Christian. But with Peter, who was Simon was this fisherman. He was this rash, brute, almost man, passionate. He never really thought too much before he spoke. He would just speak, and his mind all the time. He was rude. You can even say he was a little rude. Very simple man. And Jesus made him what? Do you guys remember what Jesus made him? The rock. He was the head of Jesus' church. So you have this man emotionally unstable. And Jesus puts almost all his powerful message on his hands. So we're going to talk about him. So how did it all start? So Simon, like I said, he was a fisherman. And he used to live by the Sea of Galilee. And his brother was Andrew. And he had a fishing company with James and John, the other apostles, Andrew, James, and John. And they were not very good at it. They could not catch a lot of fish. They tried, but they were never very successful. And he was married. He had 3 children. And his brother Andrew, he was very curious. Andrew was always very curious. He wanted to know, he wants to learn. And he followed for a long time John the Baptist. And he was amazed by all the things that John was saying, talking about the Messiah, that he was coming. And he often talked to Peter about it. Oh, let's come and see John. He's really, he has this wonderful message. You're really going to be interested. He's like, no, I don't want to know about this. And one day, Andrew saw Jesus. And Jesus was talking to the people. And Andrew saw him. And Andrew's like, oh my God, this man is the real deal. And what do? when we hear something really good and we see something really amazing. Well, today we text, right? We go to Facebook, we tweet the message, we WhatsApp, we do. But back in the days, what did they do? They ran and they talked to each other. So he ran to his brother. He went to Simon and said, Simon. And he's like, where are you? You should be here fishing. That's why. No wonder we don't catch anything. You're never here. It's like, no, I just heard this most beautiful message. It's the Messiah, this rabbi called Jesus. He's the real deal. You have to come and listen to him. He's amazing. And it's like, oh, I don't know about it. You're always with your stories, with your people, and I don't know. It's like, no, you should come and listen to him. So Peter, finally, Andrew bugged him so much, and he's like, okay, let me go and check this man out, see if it's really what you're saying he is. And when he got there, he saw Jesus, and he felt something that was beyond words. And he knew at that time there was something different about that man. He could feel it in his heart, because Peter was all heart. And he could feel it in his heart that was something different. And then when he was facing Jesus, Jesus turned to him, and Jesus felt the presence. Jesus didn't need to look at people. He felt people. One day we're going to be able to do what he did. We're still, evolving. And he felt the presence of Peter. And he looked at Peter, who was not Peter, it was Simon. And mind you, imagine if you're meeting someone and they did what Jesus did to Peter. He turns to Simon and says, Simon, son of Jonas, Simon Bar Jonas, from now on I'll call you Peter, or from now on I'll call you Cephas. Cephas is the Hebrew word for Peter in Greek, meaning rock. So can you imagine you meeting someone? Okay, your name is Susan. Was it Susan? Susan. But from now on, just forget Susan. I'm just going to call you Peter. Pirette. So Peter was confused. That was the first time he met Jesus. He was impressed but confused. It's like, okay. So I'm Peter. They were fishing. Again, not catching a lot of fish. And Jesus was there. And he wanted to preach for the people that are on the beach. And he asked Simon, now Peter, to use his boat. Can I use your boat so I can stand up and I can project my voice a little better so people on the beach can hear me better? And that's one thing about Peter. He always obeyed Jesus. Even though we're going to see in his story that he was the only disciple that said no to Jesus, that used to rebuke Jesus. He was the only one that did that. The others never did it, but he did, because that was his personality. So he stand up, Jesus go, he helps Jesus climb in the boat and gives a sermon. The Gospels don't talk about the sermon, what Jesus really talked about during that sermon, but afterwards, they were not catching anything, so Jesus tells them, no, let's go back to the water. And, well, what do you do to impress a fisherman? If you want to impress a fisherman, what do you do? Any guesses? You catch fish. And so Peter looks at Jesus like, isn't he a carpenter? He wants to fish with us? But okay, you can come climb on it, and you want to go, I'll humor you. We'll take you out. And Peter's like, well, we're not going to catch anything because it's daytime and the fish doesn't come up when there's light, only at night. It's like, no, okay, but I'll take you. And they took, and of course, sure enough, what happens? They catch a lot of fish. And Peter is super impressed by the number of fish that they caught. And he looks at Jesus like, yes, he is the man. And Jesus turns to him and say, come to him and to the other fishermen that were in the boat, come and follow me. I'm going to make you a fisher a fisher of men. And he's like, I'll follow you. Remember, his whole heart, his heart felt it. I'll follow you, Jesus. And he followed Jesus. And the other day, they were also in the water, not with Jesus. Jesus was coming from the other side, walking on the beach. And later, the storm started, and Peter looks at the water, and what does he see? You guys remember this passage? Jesus walking. Jesus was walking on the water, and Peter is the only one of the apostles that look at it. He said, I'm going to give it a try. And he does. So he steps on the water. I imagine the first foot is probably easy, but the second one is the hardest one, right? You put one and then the second one. And he did it. He was staring at Jesus, looking eye in eye. And then he did. 1 step, 2 step. But then what happened? He started thinking, oh no, I'm on the water. And he sunk. Then Jesus grabbed him and brought him back to the boat. And for all this time that Peter was following Jesus, he saw Jesus doing all these amazing things that we know and we talked about and read about. Jesus healing, Jesus teaching the people that's supposed to know the law better, God better. Jesus knew more than they did. So Peter is watching all this and trying to understand who Jesus was. That's what we do, isn't it? When we're reading, when we're learning about Jesus, we're trying to understand who Jesus is and what his message means. So you have the simple man there trying to understand the grandiosity. What was that all about? Jesus then starts forming in Peter's mind. And he's thinking, this man is the king. He's the Messiah. He is the one that's going to save us from the Romans. He's going to just take back Jerusalem and give us the city with the Jews. But what he's thinking, he started building up in his mind this warrior Jesus. And after that, there were many things that happened that kind of helped him with this vision. And so he was, for example, the Sunday Palms when Jesus entered Jerusalem and everyone is just saying, Hosannas, Hosannas, and praising him. So he's looking at everyone, praising the Lord and putting the palm leaves down. He's like, they know he is the king. And then after that, during the night, the Last Supper, during their Last Supper, after he had witnessed all these miracles, all the miracles, all the power of Jesus, so he is sitting in the supper before the supper, and Jesus says, "Now I'm going to wash your feet." And then again, Peter was confused. Okay, how the king, the rabbi, my master, how is he going to wash my feet? And at the time, washing feet was something that only slaves did, like the lowest of the lowest. You don't touch anyone's feet. And Peter is like, "No, Jesus, you're not going to touch my feet. There's no way I should be touching. I wash your feet, but you don't wash my feet." It's like, no. And Jesus turns to Peter and rebukes him. "Peter, if you don't let me wash your feet, you have no part of me." And he goes, "Okay, wash me all then, Lord. You can wash my whole body." No, I don't need to wash all your body. He's like, "Baptize me." It's like, "No, I don't need to baptize you. I just need to wash your feet." So all that idea of this powerful king and Lord and Savior is now washing feet. What is he doing? So Peter got super confused. And then later on during the supper, Jesus says that that he's going to be captured. And he says that you're all going to scatter. You're going to leave me. and you're going to deny me, and then you're going to disown me. And Peter stands up and says, Lord, I'll never disown you. I'll protect you. I'll never deny you. And then Jesus tells him that famous passage that we know. Peter, before the rooster crows this morning, you're going to deny me. How many times, he said? You're going to deny me 3 times. And he's like, never. Then after that, Jesus goes to pray in the garden. And he tells the apostles, it was John, James, and Peter, watch and pray. I'm gonna pray here. I'm gonna meditate. You guys stay here. You watch and pray. Now, let's try to understand Peter here. So Jesus is saying, watch. Watch is military language, isn't it? So you're telling me that I got to watch. You told me before that I'm going to deny you. I'm going to denounce you. So I'm not going to disown you. I'm not going to be here for you. No, Lord, I'm here for you. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to defend you. And sure enough, they slept, right? And Jesus had to. Every time Jesus he needed to say anything to the apostles, he would come to Peter. Even though in the gospel it says that John was the most loved apostle, that Jesus loved him the most, you can clearly see that Peter was Jesus' best friend. Because he would go to Peter when he wanted to talk to the apostles, when he wanted to give them a message. And that day there were 3 apostles, but Jesus went to Peter. Peter, why did you sleep? Wake up. I told you. Watch and pray. And again, Peter slept. He was tired from the whole day and the supper. It was a long supper. He slept again. And then Jesus rebuked him. And then another time, wake up, watch and pray. And then later in that night, they saw what happened. The army came, led by Judas. And Peter was where he had a sword. He was bearing a sword that Jesus had told him to buy. So we know by the gospel that 2 apostles had swords that night. And so Simon's already watch and pray. You're going to leave me. You're just going to let me, none of you are going to defend me. So he sees that army coming to take Jesus away. What does he do? What does he do? What would you have done? He pulls the sword and he tries to what? Defend Jesus. It's like, no, Lord, I'm going to defend you. Look at me. He pulls the sword and he strikes the high priestess, the servant ear. His earlobe, not very good at swordsmanship. Peter, he was a fisherman, so he struck the servant's ear and cut his earlobe. What did Jesus do? Rebukes Peter. Peter, what are you doing? No. And then he heals the servant's ear. If Jesus hadn't done that, Peter probably would have also even died, because that was a very bad offense to hurt a servant's ear, especially for a high priestess servant. And so Simon is confused. And in that moment, Peter looks at Jesus, at the king, and he knows what Jesus is capable of doing. And he sees that army taking him away, and he's doing nothing. He's doing nothing. He's let himself being captured, and he's confused one more time. And then when he goes to the city to see what was happening, and then people asked him 3 times, 3 different people asked him 3 times if he knew Jesus. What did he say? He said that he did not know him. But I ask you, why Peter said that he did not know Jesus? Because he was afraid? I don't think so, because if Peter was afraid, he wouldn't have used his sword in front of everyone. why did Peter said that he did not know Jesus? Because he didn't. He was confused. He's like, I don't know who that man is. I thought I knew, but I don't. Because he, even though he was following Jesus for those years, throughout his mission, he didn't understand what Jesus was all about. And I ask you, don't we do the same? Like sometimes we think we understand the message, and then we're like, wait a minute, I don't think, no. Jesus is not really, okay, that's not it then? Isn't it? Doesn't it happen to us? And so after that all happened, Jesus was crucified and he resurrects. And then Jesus showed himself to Mary, and then after Mary to Magdalene, and then after that to the apostles, and again he shows up to Peter and the other apostles on the beach. So they're fishing, and of course they were catching what? Nothing, because that's what they did. They never caught anything. Not good fishermen. And they saw someone at the beach, and they didn't recognize Jesus at first. And then Jesus turns to them, and he's at the beach, and they're on the water and on the boat, and he goes, throw your net again on the right side now. And you know when you're best friends with someone and they say something you know is them? Do you know what I'm talking about? Sometimes, or couples, they do that when they have that phrase or word, and you know that's that person, even though you can't see, but you know it's them. And when Jesus said, throw your net again, now on the right side, Peter knows it's Jesus. He's back. And he goes out of the boat, runs to the water, runs to the beach, towards the beach, and Jesus is there, preparing breakfast for them. And he asks, just bring a little fish, whatever you caught, and we'll make breakfast and we eat here. And so Peter sits in front of Jesus, and he's mesmerized again. He's there. The Lord is there. And he's looking at him, and Jesus asks him, Simon, do you love me? And Peter looks at him, Lord, yes, I love you. I love you with all my heart. And then Jesus looks at him again and says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter goes, you already asked me that. I've already said yes. But he goes, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. He goes, so take care of my sheep. Feed my lamb. And he said again, Peter, do you love me? At that time, Peter was already upset. He's like, Lord, yes, I do love you. But in the text, we see that Jesus asks him, the word for love, there are many words for love in Greek. And Jesus asks him, do you agape me? Agape meaning love, unconditional love, a huge love, right? That love that is big, the love we want to have, the love we're learning to love. And Peter, the third time, answers him, I love you, but he uses the word philia, which is the love of friend. Meaning, Peter knew who he was himself this time, and he knew who Jesus was. He had found out. It was he had the epiphany. He knew he couldn't say that he agape Jesus, like the Jesus love. It's like, I know I cannot tell you, Lord, that I love you like you do me, but I'll get there. So at that moment, Peter became really Peter. He realized who Jesus really was. And then he was be able to become the rock, the real rock of the church, and do all the beautiful things we know Peter did. And so I think we can relate to Peter in our struggle to understand Jesus. And that's how it works too. As we try to understand who Jesus is and his message, we're trying to understand his message, we find ourselves in the process. And we become different people in the process. That's evolution. We evolve. So, we already talked about his personality. So at that moment, the confusion that he denies, and Jesus looks at him, and he couldn't bear looking at Jesus back. He knew, I don't know. I didn't get it. He was so honest. The one thing that impresses me the most about Peter, about Simon, is he is so honest with himself. He does not pretend. If he doesn't know, he doesn't know. If he didn't understand, he didn't understand. And that is crucial for us. When we're in this path of evolution, of becoming the person, the spirit that we want to become, that God wants us to become, it's important that we are honest with ourselves. We don't pretend. We don't pretend to understand a message that we didn't understand. And it's okay to be confused. It's okay. It's part of the process. So in that moment, he was angry. And then you can say, how can the rock feel anger? Don't we feel when we talk about in the Spirit Center, inner transformation. Do you talk about a lot, about the inner transformation here at the center? So we talk about inner transformation all the time. And when we're in the process of this evolution, inner transformation, when we feel something that we consider negative, what do? We deny it. When we say we can't feel it. And then he did feel anger. But the same man that felt anger at other time, he was able to heal. So what it means that also when we're not perfect yet, we're not all done, we're not ready, we're not all that God wants us to be, but still we can do a lot of good. We don't have to wait until we become angels or perfect to do good. And Peter, at this passage, Acts 3, they were in the temple, him and two other apostles. And this beggar, he was asking for money in front of the temple. And Peter turns to him and said, well, I don't have what you want. What are you asking? Because he was asking for gold. It's like, I don't have money. But what I have, I'll give you. And the man couldn't walk. He was lame, and he could make that man walk again. The man full of flaws, Peter, Simon, like us, was able to do great things. So I bought this face because this face of anger. I didn't want to bring an ugly face of anger, so I brought a cute face of anger. She's angry. And sometimes we get angry and we have other negative emotions, don't we? And we beat ourselves up. Oh, I'm a Christian. I believe in the message of Jesus. I'm a spiritist. How can I feel angry? This is really bad. And then we have to look, when we feel these emotions, how should we act? We should be honest with ourselves. That's what we learn. Even Paul, the apostle, there is a passage that he struggled with himself, with his inner transformation. There is a passage in Romans 7:15 that he says, I don't really understand myself. See if you can relate. I don't really understand myself. For I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. He says, I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. But if I know that what I'm doing is wrong, this shows that I agree that the law is good. He's saying, see how also Paul is being honest with himself? Okay, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, but I know the right now. I know what I should be doing, and that's a beginning. And the gospel according to Spiritism, the spirits, they talk about anger. And this is one emotion, one negative emotion. We have many, right? Don't we feel many negative emotions? And they said, and the spirits, they tell us that the orange, if we look at it, will nearly all be found in hurt pride. Even irritations which originate from trivial issues take on a magnitude directly related to the importance we attach to ourselves. Because sometimes we feel like we are so ready, we know it all, we're good, that anything that happens around us, it's like, how come? How come? And this side that Paul here is saying that he doesn't. Because at the end of this passage, he said, so I'm not the one doing wrong, he says. Paul tells us here that he's not the one doing wrong. It is sin living in me that does it. Now, in Spiritism, we don't really see sin as, other Christians do. For us, sin is when you make a mistake, when you're not doing it right, when you miss the mark. So Paul is saying, well, it's not really me, my higher self, that is doing it. There is something in me that is doing it, right? But it's still part of you, and it's the shadow. What, for example, Carl Gustav Jung calls the shadow. And the shadow is this unknown dark side that exists inside of us. And usually we deny ourselves that exists. It's that, when our flaws, our dark part, that is it is part of our being, and we deny. And Joanna de Angelis, the mentor, the guidance spirit of Divaldo Franco, she brought a whole collection talking about the shadow. She talks about the shadow and how we spiritists, we need to be alert about our shadows and be okay and be honest about this side that we're working on. We are a work in progress. And she says that the most fundamental characteristic of the lower levels of the being is the prevalence of negative content and the fragility of the higher self before the tormented ego, creating projections of shadow and destroying aspirations of peace. So she's telling us that if we don't really accept that we have this dark side, we can never. If you don't accept you have a problem, you can never fix it. You're not going to start fixing a problem that you deny existence. It's simple. And so she says, we have to understand, and it's okay. And the spirits, they tell us, when Kardec asks the spirits, what is the most efficient way to ensuring one's moral improvement in the present life and resisting the attraction of evil? He says, and then the spirits, they reply, one of the sages of antiquity has told you, know thyself. Self-knowledge, and he continues, the spirit continues, self-knowledge is therefore the key to individual improvement. But you will ask, how is one to judge oneself? Is not each man subject to the illusion of self-love, which diminish his faults in his own eyes and find excuses for them? The miser thinks himself to be merely practicing economy and foresight. What happens is we always rationalize. We rationalize all our difficulties, right? Our opportunities, all that's shadow, everything that comes up as negative. What do? We excuse ourselves. Oh, I'm not really. Right? I'm not like here. The spirit. He uses an example: a person that doesn't like to, someone that is frugal, that doesn't want to spend. It's like, oh, I'm doing this. It's not because I'm frugal, not because, I just want to save for my family. And what is the goal of Spiritism? In the book called Spiritism in the Simplest Expression, the spirits, they tell us that the true spiritist is not one who believes in manifestations, but he who learned from teachings given by the spirits. It is useless to believe if this faith does not make one progress positively. So you cannot merely, okay. Oh, I understand. But you have to live it. You have to really, it has to improve your life. You have to become a better person. Otherwise, it's only knowledge. And this picture is from a book called I Came Back as Volte from the brother Jacob. And this is a spirit, and he's a spirit that I like this book a lot because it helps us to understand sometimes why we're living in an illusion, why we don't really get the Jesus message. He lived in Brazil when he was incarnated, his past incarnation, and he was the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. And this guy did a lot of things. He was like in the Spiritist movement. He was giving talks, and he was doing charity work. And when he passes, he arrives in the other world. He discarnates, and then he's looking at the other spirits that come and talk to him. And it gets to a point that he starts feeling ashamed because his daughter has this beautiful light coming out of her. And other spirits had this beautiful light coming out of them. And he looks at himself. He was kind of opaque, not very bright, not shining. And he's like, I did so much. I have done so much. I talked. I did the talks. I went to all the congress. We did in Brazil, we do the soup for the poor. We have like this. We have the kitchen, the soup kitchen. So I did the soup kitchen. How come I'm not bright like the others? I thought I would be like the sun when I discarnate. And Bezerra de Menezes, which is who is an enlightened spirit, and another enlightened spirits that were with them, explained to him, well, you didn't work on your inner transformation. You did a lot outside. You're doing it. It was good for the people you did. You did a good thing. It was charity. You helped out a lot of people. But you didn't touch where? You didn't build the kingdom of God inside of you. Because we think that the kingdom of God is outside. And what Peter had trouble to understand, he thought that Jesus was there to conquer the outside. Jesus was there to conquer the outer world. No. Jesus came to help us conquer which world? Our inner world. The kingdom of God is inside of us. And that's where we have to build. And he didn't understand that. Later, I think God loves us so much that we have so many opportunities to find ourselves and to rebuild and to restart. And he did. And then in the spiritual world, he had the opportunity to learn a little more. And then he really went through inner transformation. So, and I brought this picture because it says a lot in the type of world we live in. If we look at the scale of worlds, we still baby spirits. There's a lot for us to learn. And sometimes we demand so much from ourselves. We want to be already ready, right? We want to be saints. We want to be enlightened. And that's not how it is. You just don't wake up one day like that. It's a process. And we have to love ourselves a little more. We need to be a little kinder to ourselves. Because we demand so much and so fast. And that's not how it works. It's not natural. It is a process. And here is the spirits are talking about the instinct of self-preservation. Because we have yet so much instinct. We act so much yet with instincts. Because we're still baby spirits. We're evolving. We're in the beginning of our journey. And we forget that. And also Joanna de Angelis, she comes back and she talks about it again, saying that the first step to be taken when you're working with yourself in this inner transformation is the acceptance of being angry. I use anger as one of the negative emotions, but the acceptance of being any negative emotion we feel the most. So the first thing we have to do is accept that we feel that way. And after we accepting that we feel that, we acknowledge that emotion. We acknowledge that that exists in us. Then there is no reason to be ashamed of anger and the fact of feeling it. So we have not to be ashamed. When we acknowledge a negative emotion, we don't have to feel ashamed. We just have to first acknowledge it. And then, because she says that if we camouflage it, if we pretend it's not there, if we pretend to be someone else, then in the face of false humility and sanctification are attitudes of those who deceive themselves, opting for others' opinions at the expense of being. So she's saying when we're worried about pretending we are someone, we're hurting ourselves because we're not really accepting who we are and what it needs to be worked on us. And she alerts us, that's very harmful. Don't do it. That's why we have to become in contact with our shadows, with that dark being that we say dark and we think evil, right? We say dark, oh my God, I have evil. It's just that part of us that it's a work in progress. And then also I brought this to remind you that Jesus was a rebel in the sense that everything, and so sometimes his message for us is to be counterintuitive. He says things that are like, for example, when he said, do I have to love my enemy? What? I cannot, it's hard to love my sister. I have to love my enemy? Right? If you have a difficult person in your life, I'm sure none of you do. This is things that happen outside here at Port St. Lucie. Your only evolved spirits live here. But in Orlando, we have difficulty with dealing with our families and friends and relationships. So he says he uses this phrase, you have heard it said, but I say. He says it many times. So this is what you think it is, but I'm telling you something totally different. And that's what took Peter a little while to understand. And for example here, to become more prosperous, give away some of what you have. It's like, how am I going to become more prosperous if I have to give away my stuff? To be promoted to leadership, become a servant. But I want to be all powerful. How am I going to become a servant? Instead of cursing our enemies, we should bless them. Good deeds done in private will see greater rewards than those done in public. What? I cannot take a selfie doing charity? What? But I love posting on Facebook. Right? Well, it's like, what am I going to do it if no one is going to see it? Right? And it's okay. Don't feel ashamed because we're all in the same boat. We're in the same planet. Meaning that our vibrations are very similar. Our difficulties, our opportunities are all the same. Don't be ashamed. That's who we are, and it's okay. We'll get better, but first we have to accept. Okay? And the question is, so Pricila, all right, I understand. I'm going to accept all my not so good part, and I know I'm evolving. I know I'm a work in progress. So what do I do to change it? That's what we want to know, right? So Jesus is great help. So we have the whole gospel, but sometimes we have a hard time understanding the gospel. And so I brought a little tips here. There's this one marvelous lady. She's a HR manager for like more than 2 decades, and her name is Cindy Wigglesworth. I don't know if you ever heard of her. And she developed, because she worked in HR for human resources for the longest time. And I don't know if you guys are familiar. Remember with the different intelligences, and then there's this, the emotional intelligence, Remember with the whole thing of emotional intelligence in the 90s? And so after the emotional intelligence, then they came up with the spiritual intelligence. So now all the Fortune 500, the big companies, they want people not only with emotional intelligence, but they want people that possesses what? Is spiritual intelligence. Because if you're spiritually intelligent, it means that you're more, what? Stable. You're a better leader. You get people to follow you. So, and she's like, okay, so let me come up, but then you have people in the corporate world, and people in the corporate world, they want to see PowerPoints and they want to see bullet points, and they asked her to put, and she decided then to put 21 steps together. And one that we're talking about here is in her little. No, this is huge. This huge work. I cannot call it a little. It's huge work. In her work, is the third part is the self mastery, and she says that we have to work on commitment to spiritual growth. We have to be committed, meaning I woke up today. I'm like, okay, let me work on my spiritual growth today. Something you got to do every day. It's like when you're trying to get rid of an addiction. You got to live one day at a time, right? Keeping higher self in charge. How is keeping the higher self in charge? A higher self is that part of you that usually wants something that is not only good for you. If something's only good for you, it doesn't have to be, when something is really good and it's your higher self talking, it's something that is going to be good for you, but it's also going to affect the ones around you positively. If something is coming to your mind, having thoughts, or you want to make a decision that is only good for you and it's going to hurt other people, guess what? That's your ego talking. That's not your higher self. So we have to learn and train. That's training. That takes time. Training to listen and to live by our higher self. Living your purpose and values. So what are your purpose and values? Do we live by our purpose and values? Or we live by others? Or other people's purpose and values? Purpose and values are, the thing that you go to bed thinking about? And the thing that you wake up thinking about? Those are your values. Those are your priorities in life. So are you living, first of all, see if they're good. And if they're good, are you living by them? Are you true to yourself? Are you being true to yourself? Or being honest to your true values? Because when we're not, then when we start getting sick, and we get depressed, we get anxious because we're not being true to our values, our principles, the things that we believe are good for us and good for the other people that we love and the others around us. And then sustaining faith, because we cannot do it alone. We need God. We need His love, and we need to be in constant contact with Him. And seeking guidance from Spirit. Seeking guidance from Spirit is from this, not only trying to find, when you maintain contact with a higher power, is also to get the inspirations from the higher power. Because we ask, but when do we stop to listen? Ask you, when you ask God for many things, don't you? I do. I ask you, when do you stop to listen the answer? Do you ever stop to listen? Do you ever pay attention to see if God is replying? And then to start our closing here, our present reality has to be accepted. If we do not wish to start a dangerous cycle of high expectations first regarding ourselves and later others. So it's when we become, we create this reality, this thing that doesn't exist, and then what happens? When then we find out it's not true, we're like, oh my God. Well, you created it. We created this whole illusion. And that will become disillusioned. But we created the illusion in the first place. Changing for the better does not translate into destroying who we were, but taking a new direction and accepting the mistakes we have made as part of the process of getting it right. Just remember that. That's very important. We're not destroying who we are. We're just accepting that we're making mistakes, and then we're going to make mistakes. the careful study of our inner world, knowledge of our emotions, no judgment, and constant self-reflection and self-love. That's very important. If we do not love ourselves in this process, it becomes torture. We must remember that we will only respond for our own actions when facing immortality, because we spend sometimes so much effort trying to change others. And the only true responsibility that we have is with ourselves. And to finish, I brought a phrase that I like a lot from C.S. Lewis, and he says, "It may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It will be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining an egg." We are like eggs at present, and you cannot go indefinitely being just an ordinary, decent egg. So we have to change. We cannot be an ordinary, decent, I'm a decent egg. No, you can't be a decent egg. You have to break the shell and learn how to fly. And I wish you all a good journey in breaking that shell. Thank you so much.